Guys, let's talk about Kemi Badenoch first. So Kemi was, elected, outpaced Robert Jenrick. However, we have seen already, I think, in like the space of 24 hours, a lot of critical mainstream media coverage of her. There's been the unearthing of it's in quotes, but I think it just was a rape joke. On social media from back in the day. We've also seen Sky News talking about the fact that she's going to be looking over her shoulder. Apparently, some of the further right members of the Tory party have been kind of in the shadows saying, support her for now, but not for long. And then also, obviously, we've immediately seen this rhetoric of Kemi's combative past and her combative nature, which plays into a lot of the sort of misogynoir that we've grown used to, I think, over the last few years. But obviously, she beat out Jenrick. I don't know, Curtis, I think you mentioned, I was just glad that Robert Jenrick was having a bad day. But this was kind of the kind of stats that came through for her in terms of her win. Beth Rigby, writing for Sky News, said her win wasn't emphatic. It was the closest result of any Tory leadership race ever. She got 56.5% of the vote against Jenrick's 43.5%, and the turnout was 72.8%. But she also won on fewer votes than Rishi Sunak lost to Liz Truss, who got 57% of the vote. This matters because it highlights the job Badenoch has on her hands to unify the party. Sir John Hayes, Jenrick backer, influential right-winger. Imagine being a Jenrick backer. Imagine that being the description that you get. Told Sky News after the vote, colleagues should get behind Badenoch for the time being. So, Mobius, you've mentioned in the chat here, theories, thoughts. They'll use her for critiquing and slandering foreign folk, and then they'll discard her like a dirty tissue. Curtis and Davey, I feel like we've seen this sort of thing before in the Tory leadership. What are you thinking?
I mean, in terms of, like you said, I think the press, I was going to say the press need to be careful and toe the line when it comes to misogynoir, but the press is literally built out of misogynoir, so that's coming. One thing I will just say is I think it would have been really funny if it was 52-48, just so that we could be like, is that a result that's not emphatic, is it? But you get what you pay for.
I feel like if that was the case, Led by Donkeys would have made a big billboard of.
They'd have done something with it.
They would have done something with it. Anything but attacking Labour. Sorry, we're talking about something different now, aren't we?
Just straight in.
Yeah.
Please,
I think with Badenoch, like it was obvious that she was going to win, and I'm not surprised. I think that she exemplifies everything that they've become now. She is exactly what they are, which is this sort of culture war obsessed, like just like no issues, only minorities, and so I'm glad that she's won, because I said this to someone this weekend. I'm kind of excited for her to stand at the dispatch box and talk to Keir Starmer about like woke jihadis and like it's like pick a lane, Kemi. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm not surprised at all by the result. She is exactly what they've become, which is irrelevant and obsessed with culture war. So
yeah,
I think you had two paths there. You had Kemi Badenoch, that represents the future of right-wing politics, which is leaning into culture wars, and that's it. And Robert Jenrick was the British Empire past. And what I'm alluding to here is there was a bit of a discussion in the media about giving reparations for the British Empire, something we should do, at least have a conversation about it. And Robert Jenrick made an op-ed in the Daily Mail saying, we shouldn't give reparations. In fact, the colonized countries that we colonized should be thanking us. It's pretty remarkable, pretty disgusting. So he's like the really old Tory from the past, the empire guy, and Kemi Badenoch is leaning into culture wars. Obviously, in policy, they don't really disagree, and Kemi probably thinks the same. But I think that's where their two pitches were. I think Jenrick is probably, on balance, slightly worse than Kemi, but there's almost no point discussing who's worse, because these are two awful candidates created from a very, very cultural heavy Conservative party.
You know what I do think is kind of typical is it feels like Robert Chedrick's really been trying to do the culture wars in the last few weeks, like especially as the contest got like hotter and hotter. He's just started saying like any shit to try and get out there and be like, I'm also kind of crazy. I say crazy stuff all the time as well.
He has
But
to look the swag to do it, though.
when it comes to when it comes to driving hatred and culture wars, and it's not necessarily something you should aspire to be very good at, but I do think we have once again got a case of a black woman who is overqualified having to go up against a mid-level white guy who can't do culture wars as well as her. Like, she's better at it, and if that's what they want from it, she's gonna win. Like, of course she was gonna win, because Robert Jenrick has, like, I don't know, he looks like an overgrown baby in the way that a lot of those old guys do. It kind of reminds you of the Michael Gove days. I was amazed that Robert Jenrick not amazed that he got as far as he did, because every time there's a Tory leadership contest, it's like choosing your favorite STI. But it's fascinating that he attempted to play into that same stuff, and she delivers it better.
Well, I think that's
Unfortunately,
what
the outcome of that is horrendous.
I think that's what the contest came down to. There's a lack of policy there. I'm pretty sure Kemi Badenoch said, "There's no time for policy right now. We need to talk about vibes," which in a way she kind of said the quiet part out loud. It's all about vibes. That's what the US election is about. Nothing to do with policy. And Kemi Badenoch is more comfortable in her own skin when talking about things. She's better with the public. She's
More
better
charisma.
at speaking. Jenrick is he's awkward. He's wooden. And I think people really, at the end of the day, being a good communicator in politics is key.
Yeah.
Even if you were to try and put yourself in the shoes of a Conservative member, God forbid, you may even agree with a lot of policies from Jenrick, even though I've just said that.
Davey both went
anyway.
Let's have a thought full
experiment.
Of shit.
You're really expensive shoes that we can't afford. I think a lot of people chose Kemi because they think she's effective, possibly effective at taking on Keir Starmer, which isn't a difficult task. And this is what does worry me a little bit, is that obviously Kemi's views, her ideology is batshit crazy. Okay, but she could be quite successful in attacking Keir Starmer, because Keir Starmer is also a wooden,
awkward,
a charisma.
Oh my god!
Character.
Can you imagine Jenrick and Keir?
What?
Like
yogurt fight.
Yeah,
yogurt fight part 2.
Is it Bill and Ben?
That was kind of cute and entertaining. This would be just depressing.
Yeah.
I thought you meant cute, like sexy. Not like those cute.
Whose rights should we take away today?
Christ.
Just,
okay.
Just to say thank you very much, Scottish Soul, for the 5 turn left memberships. Very, very grateful for that. I think James already taken one, which is wonderful.
And James Ward as well.
James Ward been gifted a membership.
Oh,
thank you for taking that gift. And Zed, fantastic. Davey, question for you. Charlotte's dropped in the chat here. Do we think that Kemi will last the average 6 months as a leader for the Tories, or longer, shorter? We talked about this a little bit before the show.
I think she's going to last a little while, but she's not going to make it to the next election, because I just feel like, well, to be fair, I say this, I'm never going to be 100% confident in anything I say about these things, because like, these people are completely misaligned with the way that I think about things, which is, like, sane and normal. So maybe she will, see them through to the next election, but I think that she's a vehicle for steering them further right. Ultimately, the fact that they've chosen her, the fact that it got the way that it did, tells you just how little the Tories have learned, in terms of they just got beaten by a Labour that had moderated to a softer right position than them. Okay, I'm not talking about whether Labour's left or right. I have my opinions on that. But they got outflanked by someone to the left.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, what should we do now? I've got an idea. Why don't we go even further to the right and change Niger for right? Like, what are you doing? Like,
which member of the Tory party was that? Was that the...
It sounds about...
that was the embodiment over all of the Tories.
Yeah,
you smash the Conservative Party together. It's like if you put in the Conservative Party in AI.
Yeah, it sounded like the guy from Kidsgrove who lost his job, the teacher. The one who lost his spot. And was like, I don't know what to do.
To be fair, I was actually going for a loose impression of the Churchill dog from The Others. Oh no!
Fantastic.
And if you're too young to remember that, get out.
It was, yeah. I mean, I think to me, it feels like the same, with Suella, when they were like, yeah, you be the one who pushes all the culture wars. And then once she got to a certain point, they were like, oh, she's doing all these culture wars and it's terrible. We're going to have to get rid of her, kick her to the curb. Same with Priti Patel. It feels as though they do have a habit of pushing someone into the limelight who's not a white guy to kind of hold the fort for a little bit. And then once they feel like they've actually got a chance of winning, she's going to immediately be kind of completely undermined. Because, I mean, looking at Curtis, I was scrapping in your Twitter comments last night. That's the only reason I go on Twitter, by the way, is to scrap on people giving to Curtis shit. But the amount of people who, like, the Tories are racist. There are so many Tories and Conservative Party supporters who are angry openly about the fact that they've got a black leader now, a black female leader.
Here's a question for you. Sorry to interject, but here's a question. Do you reckon Frank Kester will be donating now that Kemi's leader?
That'll be
I like
interesting.
that Kemi. She makes you like all black women, not like that Diane Abbott.
It makes me want to shoot them all.
And it'd be his anti-racist arc. He'd be like, I'm not a racist. I've given money to a black woman.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. I reckon
actually
that's
it's you lefties that are the real racists.
You're the real racist.
I love that one.
Yeah.
The reverse racism is my favorite card to play.
If you really think about it, you guys are racist because you're not uncritically backing a black woman with the ideas of an absolute moron.
No.
Well, I that's a good point you made, and I feel like we could probably discuss a slightly different angle. Which
what
is
it?
Well, James Cleverly came out and he I sort of agree with him where he attacks Labour for being pale, male, and stale, right? Which at first I thought was quite funny because he says Labour are obsessed with identity politics, and then he goes and literally does identity politics.
When did he get so sassy, James Cleverly?
James
Cleverly's never come out with anything that sassy in his life.
In fairness, though, like I love it when the right do this because I remember when Darren Grimes did this thing a little while ago where he was like, "Oh, the left is obsessed with identity politics," and as a northern working class gay man, I think it's disgusting. And I'm like,
I can tell you right now, the political right are obsessed with identity politics. I mean, that's their entire politics. All they talk about is they're sick of the wokes, sick of the immigrants, sick of the queers, sick of the gays, sick of the blacks, sick of the browns. That's all their politics is. So everything they do is just pure projection. And of course, loads of people have jumped on James Cleverly and said, "Why are you doing this sort of identity politics?" But
don't point out the white people.
Well, I
only point out the not white people.
Unironically, I've seen people say, with big accounts, by the way, say, "Oh, is it really bad to be white now?" I'm like, okay, right, well, this is Twitter for you. But obviously, though, that does beg the question, and he is slightly right here. I'll give him a little bit of credit that Labour Party has only ever had a white man as leader.
And there were 7 people up for Labour leadership with Keir Starmer, and 6 of them were women.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a Guardian piece who backed
Yogurt Boy.
I can't remember who wrote the Guardian piece, but they said we should back Keir Starmer over Rebecca Long Bailey. That is the feminist vote. Obviously, Guardian shit libs. They wanted Keir Starmer based on the fact that he's an establishment hack, and the Guardian is now an establishment hack newspaper. But what's really interesting is the Labour Party are trying to change the leadership rules. They already changed it a little bit by increasing the threshold to get on the ballot. And when you do that, that disproportionately affects women and MPs of colour. Mm-hmm. So when they do their virtue signalling, when you've got Keir Starmer taking a knee with Angela Rayner, and you remember that picture in 2020 in the office, that means nothing either, because they don't want to have a woman or a black man or black woman as leader unless they conform to the very niche right-wing politics. Yeah. So that is a criticism that James Cleverly is right. Labour have been pretty pale, male, and stale, but there's a caveat here, which I'll go into in a minute, which is liberal identity politics. But he is kind of right, though. I mean, it's hard to, especially when it comes to the narrative that the Conservatives are more of a racist party than the Labour Party, and Labour stands up for minorities, yada, yada, yada. But it's hard to convey that message when they've only had white men as leader.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like the Labour Party is as like I was reading about all the stuff with Diane Abbott when she was first standing for MP, and there was like the constant belief that like black MPs wouldn't get the vote. There's huge amounts of racism, misogyny, misogynoir across both of those parts, and to me, it feels like a class issue due to the fact that like a huge amount of politicians and MPs who are like in the in group across any party went to university together, went to private schools together. It all kind of ties into that same sort of elitism thing. But it is, yeah, I think James Cleverly's got a point, to be honest. He's right on that. But at the same time, we know that he's using it for evil.
Absolutely, yeah. He's not concerned about the lack of representation, is he?
No.
And people kick off about this because he's obviously a person of color, and obviously we need to get into this discussion in a minute, which is that like, and we should bring up Dawn Butler. When you criticize a person of color, they're like, well, hold on a second, how can you call a person of color racist? Whatever, that makes no sense. They can be, by the way.
David, what were you going to say?
It's just the big thing is, the second you acknowledge, like, you can celebrate milestones and stuff like that. Kemi Badenoch is the first black woman to lead a major political party. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in terms of, you know, it'd be great if she wasn't evil. But, like, the problem is the Tories consistently during kind of, like, I think particularly they did it a lot last year. They were constantly doing this thing of like, look at us though, we're so diverse. Look how diverse we're so diverse. Like, it's great how diverse we are. And I'm like, but you guys constantly harping on about that devalues it. It shouldn't be we've become like, you know, the coat of many colors because we think it looks good. It should be because you're there on merit, and constantly drawing on this thing lessens it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of if you acknowledge it, it becomes less powerful, because the whole point is that that's what Britain looks like. Britain is full of people that are different colours and different sexualities and gender identities and blah, blah, blah. And the second you're like, well, actually, we fulfilled our quota, I'm like, again, like, it goes back to who's harping on about freaking identity politics now?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, it ties into the, I guess, like, it's a tricky one, because I do feel that, like, the representation part is super, super important. But at the same time, we fully understand how the Tories have weaponized POC politicians over the last few years in particular to be like, look, it's not bad. But the Labour Party is very racist. And like has like if you think about all of the MPs that they have devalued, disparaged, shat on really in the last year or so, even since the election, it's like you've got Zara Sultana, you've got Dawn Butler, you've got Diane Abbott, you've got like Nadia Whittome, who was told that like she wouldn't get funding for her domestic abuse work that she was doing if she didn't back a certain vote. Like, it's always the POC politicians in the Labour Party that seem to get the brunt of abuse, and I think it is super apparent. Like, I think on the ground, like looking at it from a broader general public perspective, if the Labour Party want to stay away from those accusations, stop being awful to all of your POC MPs, right?
Yeah.
If you ask me about, I mean, to slightly disagree with David on the fact that Kemi's the first black Tory leader, to me that means absolutely nothing. Just
I thought you were disagreeing with the fact that she was. I was like, I mean, she was.
that is like, true.
Have I
but it's like
Margaret Thatcher was 125th.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Don't even.
We should all do DNA tests. That'd be interesting. You know, when Rishi Sunak became prime minister without an election, people were saying, "Oh, it's historic, the first brown PM." And some people are saying that now you've got people on the Labour side, you've got Keir Starmer saying this is wonderful. I don't give a fuck. I don't care that she's black, right? I'm a person of colour. Do you think I care? I don't care, because at the end of the day, it's the ideology and policies that matter. That's it. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a person of color, but you're going to enact fascist or white supremacist politics or classist politics. So
you mentioned DNA tests. Do you reckon it would be like?
I see the liberals there. They go, politics aside, right? Politics aside, you do have to respect that. You do have to. It's wonderful. It doesn't mean shit. It's like, have you not learned your lesson from Obama? Right? That was genuinely exciting at the time because it was like, oh my God, the first black president. But what happened with Obama? I mean, his policies were very anti-black. Talk about police violence, talk about locking up those who are smoking weed or possessions of weed, disproportionately affected people of color in poorer communities. He didn't do anything about that, right? He made it worse. And of course, when it comes to his foreign policy, the guy loved his drone and his drone killings. So I do get sick of that idea. It's like, you know, we politics aside, you can't separate that. No, politics not aside. Bring politics back to it.
Well, I mean,
that's why I supported Jeremy Corbyn, an old white man, because he had some good politics. Right? I'd take him over Kemi Badenoch any day.
But I do think it's like, obviously it's not politics aside. I think Mobius has put a really good comment in the chat here on it's not the same as, obviously, like white women, different situation, but like the idea, like Margaret Thatcher being the first female prime minister, she became female prime minister at a point in time where she couldn't even go up like the staircase at the Tory headquarters club because it was for men only. And it is this kind of like ladder pulling scenario of like, you get people into these positions. It's the same as like, what's his face? Is it Darren? What's his name? The guy who got Dan Wootton. Like, there's all of these people who are like, the work that has been done for them to ever be able to get into that kind of position, and then they're immediately going to pull the ladder up and prevent other people from being able to do the same. And but you can see how, from a broader public perspective, it feels
Absolutely.
how it plays. It will play successfully if Labour keep being massive racists.
Oh, I completely understand. And that's what they're doing so bad at the optics game, which is why what James cleverly said, whilst his intentions are, not pure, he probably represents nefarious. He represents a view that could be an effective narrative that, look at Labour, they've only ever elected white men. They must have a problem. Because then that's where
they do.
Well, they do, and that's the thing. It's absolutely true. They do have a problem with women. They do have a problem with specifically women of color. Absolutely, especially if they're on the left, almost exclusively on the left. But that's still racist and sexist in and of itself. That you must subscribe to a certain kind of politics to be treated fairly. So yeah, again, James is kind of right about that. But then that feeds into the whole so it's the left who are the real racist and sexist, and the right who aren't. One, the Labour Party are not left wing. I think we all know that. And secondly, that's just not true. But of course, the politics of Keir Starmer doesn't help that narrative by only electing white men. You're feeding into this narrative that the right are setting forth toward the country.
I think the big thing is, like, I can understand minorities wanting to celebrate seeing someone that looks like them in a position. And I get that. I get the optics of that and everything. But it's like, like I talk about him a lot because I fucking hate his guts. Wes Streeting's a gay guy. I couldn't give a fuck. I don't care that he's gay. He's like an internally homophobic asshole as far as I'm concerned. But also the fact that our health secretary is gay. Oh, that's great. He's also fucking ruining the NHS, and he's a massive transphobic piece of shit. So it doesn't matter. I don't care. It's not something to celebrate. If anything, I made what I thought was quite an eloquent video about this last week. It's worse in some ways. I'm going to toot my own horn, but like, it really annoys me that he is someone that understands what it's like to be minoritized by a society that like does not want to accept us. And he's like, well, I got mine. Time to shit on the next people. And I'm like, you are awful, So I think there's nuance that has to be there. Like we can say like, okay, you're allowed to be like, wow, like new boundaries are being broken. But if those boundaries are being broken by someone who's just going to fuck everything up, it's not exactly a win for the Bucks, is it? Oh my God, Kemi Badenoch is the first black female leader of the Tories, and she also hates literally every single living human being. So not exactly.
I do like this comment here though from Double D.
Yeah, I mean, she's going to be pushing that, continuing on with that vehicle, but in the same way Suella did, in the same way Pretty did.
Because I feel like what they're trying to do here is to say, see, even people of color are sick of immigrants and refugees.
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah,
what I mean? So it's like it's trying
yeah.
to sort of bat away the racism allegation, because if
But I
only
don't.
white people say it, then it's like, well, you're just saying that because you're racist. It was not actually, because we have a black person who says that immigration is too high and the boats are a problem. See, that just shows how far we've gone.
But
It's by
I
the
don't
it's by
think that's
the
why she's been
LGB with the T
elected.
people.
Like
Sorry,
that.
you go.
Sorry, my turn. I do think it's important. Like that. I don't think that's why she was elected by the leadership of the Tories. Like I think it is because she would be objectively more qualified and
Yeah,
better at it
I
than
agree.
Robert Jenrick. I think what what we're already seeing though, and what will happen over the next few months, like Liz Truss was an absolute fool. She tanked our whole economy in the space of like 5 days. But the level of abuse and misogyny that you see in like being a female leader of a right wing party, there's only so far that you can cheat your way within a group that fundamentally doesn't respect or care about you, and also as part of a wider society that doesn't respect or care about you. And I think it'll be like it's the same thing as when David Tennant said that she should be shot or whatever. Like that was like there's a lot like there's
I don't think
I
think
don't
he said
like
that.
Kemi. He did say he said that and then he stopped and then he took it back immediately.
I
But
thought he said she should shut up, but
no,
I don't
he's
know.
yeah he swapped. He said that one first and then the other one, and then a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
people were like, "Yeah, haha."
Mm.
There is a level like people don't like Boris Johnson. People hated Boris Johnson. People said a lot of negative things about Boris Johnson. There's a different element to it when it comes to speaking about female leaders. And there's going to be a whole other element to it now for Kemi. The misogynoir that is going to come out of it is going to be absolutely horrifying. And it feels like it always comes out this way in the end. Like it ends up like there's only so far that people like anyone who's not a white guy can make it as leaders of these parties. So I think it's going to be interesting though to see how the criticism of Kemi is navigated, particularly by like our pals on the left, see how people manage it, because there is an element of like glee and like stupid woman that comes
Mm.
out when people are
Yeah.
criticizing female right-wing leaders. And I know this isn't like she's right-wing political leader either way, she's not going to be great, but it is a time when I think true colors kind of show from people in terms of how intersectional they actually are, because the criticism does feel very very different.
I think as well, though, it's not just about in that moment making a criticism that's wrong. Obviously, we all committed to doing the reading and, everything like that in 2020. How many people have done the reading? It's about the notes that you get when you fuck up. And this is what
Mm,
really bugs me. If you say something and it taps into a really bad stereotype, then take your notes. You are
yeah,
allowed to say, well, completely, and I get your point there. This is what I meant, and you can clarify. But don't just immediately jump to the like, well, no, it's not what I'm saying. Like just at least listen and entertain the idea that you might want to just be more careful with your language because it's
yeah,
about splash damage. If you say something bad about Kemi Badenoch, I don't give a shit if it hurts her feelings. I think she's a fucking awful human being. I've heard the things that she said. I've heard the policies that she likes. I've seen the
mm,
things that she's backed as a Tory. But when you say something that taps into a harmful stereotype about black women, it
yeah,
hurts all the black women that hear it. And
mm-hmm,
then they've got to go, could you not do that actually though? Because that taps into this. And then they get people being like, oh, okay. Oh, so I've hurt your feelings now. Oh, well, I was
Mm.
actually talking about Kemi Badenoch, but let's just, and it's like, it's so demeaning to have to be like, just a crumb of please don't tap into these really harmful stereotypes, please.
yeah,
It's like you said, this is the true test of are you truly intersectional, or did you read, like why I'm no longer talking to white people about race and go, that's it, completed it, mate.
did it now.
Yeah.
Got my ally card. Well, yeah, I mean, it's like someone's mentioned in the chat, like, I don't think that David Tennant wished harm or anything, but there was so much like celebration for fundamentally a very, very wealthy white guy saying that a black woman shouldn't exist. And then there were people, but even though he took it back in the moment and said,
Mm.
I didn't mean that. I meant it this way because he realized how bad it sounded. There was still a bunch of people who, until then, I considered to be sort of progressive pals in this sort of space, commenting on black women's videos about it, saying, like, no, but he didn't mean it actually. So have you considered that actually he's
then
a good guy, and like not listening to black women who are saying this is not some like we don't want to hear you like wishing death on a black leader is not okay. Like in the like, and especially when there's a double standard of like, would he have said that in the same context? Like when you've got people actually owning up and saying I shouldn't have said that, still going on to defend it and being like, no, he didn't mean it that way. It's very, very patronizing. So it'll be interesting to see those dynamics, I think, play out over the next few months as well.
Someone obviously mentioned Dawn Butler. I've actually, because there's been a lot of pushback against her to what she said, and I want to read out the tweet.
Yeah.
Which I actually think optically poor, but her argument, if I'm honest, is correct. So she tweeted, today the most prominent member of white supremacy's black collaborator class in Britain is likely to be made leader of the Conservative Party. Here are some handy tips for surviving the immediate surge of Badenockism, i.e. white supremacy and blackface. Now, obviously, you know, everyone's going to be, what everyone did, shit their pants over it. There's been calls for Keir Starmer to remove the whip. And again, optically, it's not a good look, but technically she's not wrong. And also, you've got to remember, this is another black woman saying this, not a white guy saying it. So she's not wrong, is she? Her argument is correct, I think.
Yeah, I mean, but I do think Keir's taken away the whip from people for pretty much anything these days, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think he's
damned if you do, he's damned if you do, he's damned if he doesn't. Because if he doesn't take it away, then people will be like, oh, so you can just say these things. And if he does, then people will be like, oh, okay, well, that's like
very
somehow,
male, pale, and stale of you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I feel like it's another thing that this self-fulfilling prophecy of Labour being that way. They're not going to know how to navigate it. The Labour's comms about most things are shite, but about this stuff in particular, it's just embarrassing. Like, it's embarrassing to watch them. The whole thing. How many was it? 44 times Diane stood up to speak,
for her own abuse in
slandered.
Parliament.
She'd been slandered, and someone had said, I wish that she would get shot, and I wish I hate all black women. And she didn't even get to fucking speak.
Yeah.
And that was because of the speaker, who, guess which party he belongs to, and also because Keir Starmer at no point was like, maybe we should listen to the person it was about. But he was very happy to send out a fucking email saying like,
exactly.
I would very much like to fundraise off the back of this thing.
Arsehole.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.